Hello, Rebecca. We're going to take a look at your 5 characteristics posting here. Let's check it out. We'll screen share. I believe I got you all queued up here. First thing is we will look at the posting itself to see how well you've got everything sort of organized, whether everything's labeled. It's all looking good so far. We've got everything kind of ordered the way we want, which is good. We have those set up so that it is easy to navigate, so that we can tell exactly what we're looking for um, when we're reviewing the posting. Contrast looks pretty good. Now we went into color and then we stayed in color here. Then we went to black and white. So we wanted to shift back into black and white here. Not a huge deal, but we did want to move back to black and white after we shifted into color. For the temperature was the only one we really wanted color on. As far as exposure, meaning how the camera captured the light, whether the photographs look overall too light, too dark, or just right, they look pretty good. I don't see any major issues in terms of things getting way too dark or way too light. They're pretty much even, which should be what it is. We had the camera set on a program mode or an automatic mode so that you didn't have to think about that. So hopefully you didn't run into that issue. Tells you a little bit about what your camera can do. And usually if there is issues at this stage with the exposure, it's because there's some sort of issue with your camera being able to record things. So looking at the direction, it's pretty straightforward. What we're doing is we're just moving the light around the table at different positions and identifying what kind of compositions lend themselves to that, what kind of scenarios do we have that would best lend themselves to a different type of lighting. Also, the direction of the light establishes the mood, the tone, and the overall sort of emotive quality of the scene. When we have a light that's sort of right in front of us, that sort of identifies things, right? When we do like a ID badge or something like that, or the lighting that's on me right now, it's very descriptive. It just reveals who I am or what I look like. It doesn't really show anything about the room or how I feel or anything like that. And so if there were more of a directional lighting, then that would change just about everything that the audience feels about what they're looking at in a photograph. So the key light is very important, and that first positioning is very important. It's why we do the direction project the very first. So here we are moving around the table. We start here, and then I can see right away that you're starting in the direction. So we're over here. I can tell where the light is based not on the light. I mean, I can tell where the light is, but more on the direction of the shadow. So here we have the light going in this direction. On this next one, I can see the lights over here. So we went from position 3 to position 4. You don't really have them identified correctly. So if I'm standing here and the light is going in this direction, which you have right here on this photograph here, the light is aiming in this direction. See where it's coming out of? It's coming out of where my square is. Let's see if I can position. I probably can't position myself any better, but right coming out of the corner here, the light is coming from here. If I'm standing here and the light's coming out from over here, this is position 2, right? Position 1 is right next to me. Position 2 is here. Position 4 would be way up here. This is 2, this is 3, this is 4. So you've got it at position 4 identified here, and the light isn't coming from there. The light is coming from position 2 on this because your camera's aimed this way and the light is over here. So these are just one of those things that we want to be able to know so that if we do create a blueprint of what we're doing, we can repeat it and then we can identify it, or even more so if we're trying to tell our assistants later on when we're big shots that we want to have them set up our lighting for us, we can tell them exactly where we want things to go. So let's continue forward and see what we have. Now you're over here on position number 3. You've got it as position 5. So you may have just been misidentifying exactly where it is. Although, now we have the light right in the front here, right next to you as position 6. So I'm not sure we're getting that. Maybe you made the photographs and here you were trying to visually identify them. That might have been the case where maybe you weren't taking notes as you were taking the photographs. That said, it looks like you're getting better at the compositions as we continued forward. The closer you get, the more you're allowing objects to dissect the scene. A composition like this, even though the lighting isn't quite there, if this space wasn't quite there, this triangle right here, if that was cut off, the rest of the scene looks great. In other words, compositionally. If you can see the sort of finger here, I can move up right here. If this was the edge of your photograph here, and then we moved over this way. So if you're framing it the way that I'm framing it here with the mouse, that is really what you were looking at. You were looking at really the space right in here as I'm circling it. And so this is really where the heart of the photograph is. This space over here, it's not even playing a part in, it's like extra words in a sentence we just don't even need. So these are the things that we learn. This isn't about criticizing the photographs. This is about what can we identify and what can we learn from the photographs that we make. We all do it. When I look at my own photographs, these are some of the things that I'm looking at very quickly, very intuitively. However, I am looking at the very same things. What is it that I'm looking at? And how can I be more clear and more essentially reduced in terms of what I'm saying? Because if I can say it in fewer words, or if I can say it more clearly in a photograph, I really want to try to do that. Okay, so now let's move into the intensity. This is where we get the second sort of bit of light. This is where we're really dealing with balancing two lights. We still have a key light. Now we're adding a fill. The fill light must always, always be secondary to that key. The key light is always the main source. It still establishes everything. The fill light just supplements it. It just adds a little bit more to it. And it looks like in a couple of these, you did it just right. Here, hopefully it'll load. What you've got here is a pretty good sense of the light. And then it looks like your fill is kind of coming over from the side here. They're pretty close to one another, but you're at least not getting that double shadow that we sometimes will get from the multiple lighting sources. You can see here shadows going in every other direction. You got a shadow going this direction. This shadow is kind of creating this. There's shadows everywhere, which can be very disturbing and very confusing. We can use those to our advantage when we're trying to create an abstraction, when we're trying to create this sort of surreal world. But if we're, for instance, doing product photography, we certainly don't want that feel, because we want it to feel very grounded and very sort of approachable. And when we have multiple shadows going everywhere, it feels very foreign to us just automatically, because we don't live in that world where multiple shadows happen very often. Only in artificial lighting does that happen. At least we're avoiding what's called the butterfly effect, where you're getting equal shadow on either side or equal highlight on either side and a shadow down the middle. That's called the butterfly effect. We'll see if that happened to you at all in any of these. Doesn't look like it. Here we've got it a little bit. This is getting to be what the butterfly effect is. Can you see this right here? You got a highlight over here, you got a highlight over here, and then a shadow down the middle. This is where the two lights are almost creating the same size light. They're kind of the same size shape, even though one is more intense, definitely. This is the key, this is the fill. The key is definitely brighter, but the shape, the size of the fill is matching the size of the key. So what you're getting is this symmetry on either side, which we call the butterfly effect. And we can use it again as an abstraction, as a graphic element in our photography, but that's not what we were trying to do here. This is all exploration. The things that I'm pointing out are really just observations for you to take note of. The experiments themselves, It's really about the experience. I want you to gather experiences and then be able to apply them to the next project and to the next project and to the next project. What I really want you to learn is, one, the principle, and number two, learn that you need to practice over and over again for these principles to sink in. Beyond that, it'll come to you, right? For everybody, it'll happen at different times, sometimes quickly, sometimes not quickly, but it happens for everyone as long as you repeat, as long as you continue to work with it. And this stuff overflows into just about every medium that we try. This isn't a composition class, but the kinds of things we do in this class really lend themselves to excellent composition. Now, what happens here in the temperature really is pretty typical. Is when we start to get into using a secondary element. So the first two projects, we really weren't paying attention to the camera much at all. Not even to light a whole lot. We were moving the lights, but we were really focusing on how the light was hitting the objects. Now, with temperature, we're starting to control the light, right? We're dialing in things about the light. Now we're starting to dial in things on our camera. Suddenly our brains have another thing to think about. And what happens almost all the time to a few students is you start to forget about composition. Suddenly we're like a mile and a half away from things. We start to not think about, oh, we need to be in close, just like we were with the bottles, or we need to really be thinking about the overall composition. You can see here, these are just three little things floating in the giant, massive void. While you are exploring the lighting, it's not really composition-wise really effectively doing anything at this point. So what you really want to do is maintain the sort of information from one area and bring it into the other. Now, as far as the exploration of the light, this you are doing, because we are seeing an effective sort of move from warm to cool to balanced to cool again, so on and so forth. So that's a good job. Looks like we are having a little bit of trouble with focus for some reason. Things look a little bit wobbly. It could be that the camera was moving a little bit on you or something like that. Again, we're just way too far away from things here. And these tend to read a little bit more like small objects on a giant field than photographs of objects, shapes, values, and tones. The lighting also is not as sort of sophisticated and complex to look at. So there are a lot of things that you are doing in a beautiful way here that are sort of getting away from you here. And that I can't say that that's atypical. That usually is what happens when we add another layer of complexity. Just take that as it is and then try to fold it back in. Some of these things you'll want to revisit later on to just sort of like, oh yeah, now I get it. And what we're doing in the class is what's called progressive learning, where we take a skill set and we take that skill set and add it to another one, add it to another one. It's kind of like a snowball. Things just keep getting bigger. We don't want to take one snowball and then set it over here and then use another one. We're just building and building and building. So we want to carry things over. Now we're back to the table again with the contrast, and you're back to composing again. So it's interesting how that kind of happens, right? You start to focus on certain things and things go away. So you will, through training and practice, get to be able to have these principles be what I would call facile, meaning you're not having to think about them. They're there, they're in your mind, you're dealing with them, you're not having to think about them actively. We want to get you there so that you don't have to forget about them. You're using them, whether you're consciously thinking about them or not. So here we have the reflector, and this is excellent. You're bouncing light, you're gathering or recycling the light left over from that from the key light, and you're gathering it with a reflector and throwing it back into the scene in a very subtle way right here. Now, again, we're about 2 steps too far away. Getting closer, getting closer, getting closer. I would much rather have to say back up than to have you say getting closer. So when in doubt, take another step closer, take another step closer. What this will do is it'll give your photographs a point of view as well. They won't feel passive, they won't feel objective. what they'll feel is subjective. They'll feel like you have something to say about this, not here's just something that I see. It's here's something I have to say about what I see. And that's where we want to get you. Now we're coming up over the top. This is an interesting perspective. I love what's going on with this shadow. This is really beautiful over here. Again, you probably can tell there's a little bit of blur here. There's a little bit, it looks like camera shake maybe on there. This is where the tripod, I think later you have the tripod now that might help you. That's a tough shot to do. The little bit of camera shake kind of, you can't really fix that afterwards. So it's unfortunate when that does end up happening. Here we've got some really nice complex things going on right in here. We just, again, need to just come right in on it, what we're really paying attention to. Again, sounds like I'm going over some of the same things, but it really is a lesson, a very simple lesson to continue to reinforce. And I'll help reinforce it for you as much as you need until you're ready to like, oh, now I get it. It's not going to kind of go away from me. This is really good. What we're doing is we're getting a little bit of detail in the shadow areas over here. This is what we want to see. We want to see some detail in the shadow areas, not just pure black. So this is a good thing here, even though, again, we're needing to step closer. Okay, now we're going to get into, on the last one, temperature, hardness. This is where we get the diffused light. And this is where on number 5, things really start to come together, and you're gonna start to see a little bit more of like what you would consider like a studio look. Because once we diffuse that lighting, you're really gonna start to see what you have come to know as studio lighting, because mostly all photographers will diffuse at least one of their light sources, if not all of their light sources, either reflecting them on a reflecting card, that's basically diffusing it, or actively diffusing it using some sort of a surface over the light. So either way, what we're doing is we're basically scattering the light so that it is not so direct, so it's not so harsh. It softens those shadows, which is really what we're doing. We're looking at the edges of the shadows. When we say hardness, that's what we're identifying, the hardness of those shadows. But even more so, what it does is it allows us to sort of render objects that otherwise would be just very difficult, like silverware. Silverware does nothing but reflect, right? But if we diffuse that light, the reflections are diffused, and so therefore they don't give us these harsh specular highlights, these harsh reflective things that sort of get in the way of the image itself. Again, last time you want to take a few steps closer. Hopefully, we'll get to do that on these next projects. I think you for the first project, you had mentioned that you had a little bit of trouble just kind of getting into it and kind of getting to know the camera. You had some help with your booth partner there. That's good. That's why I pair everybody with other students, because learning together is the way to go for it. Ask me questions. I'm there in the studio. I usually don't try to interfere too much because I do want you to sort of problem solve. But when things kind of get too much of a puzzle, I'm right there to kind of guide you along. Or if I see something active that can quickly be corrected, I'll try to do that for you. This isn't about the camera. This is really about your vision. That's what we want to develop. We're going to be moving through this next camera exercise. Once we get past that, we're really going to be starting to focus on how you see things and how we can take these two elements, quality of light, control of the camera, how we can use those together in order to express things that you're interested in expressing. So that's where we're headed in the course. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what else you're going to be up to in the studio, and we'll see you. All right. Bye-bye now.